didn't like it. There's not as many hands when I asked that question. I noticed that first service. I realized here some time ago, when I want to be encouraged, I come to church. When I want to be sobered up, I go to Facebook. I go to Facebook because there are some rascals on Facebook, yes sir. And they like me because they sign up under different names all the time, I think, just to. But anyway, I do get a few things off of Facebook that just make it a really redemptive experience. My parents accused me of lying today. I looked at them and said, Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, and walked away like a boss. I love that one. I love this one too. Raisin cookies that look like chocolate chip cookies are the main reason I have trust issues. I like the one I saw, a couple months ago. It said, there's been a strange phenomenon happening at work lately. People have been bringing food with names on it. Yesterday, I had a wonderful tuna sandwich named Kevin. There's another one, sorry. I like this one too. It said, if your husband said he's going to fix it, he's going to fix it. And he doesn't need to be reminded every 6 months. I'll read you one more and then we'll get on to the real meat. A thief broke into my house last night. He started looking for money. So I woke up and searched with him. That's funny. All right. Grab your Bibles, open to Psalms 84, if you would, 84th Psalm. You know, one of the reoccurring themes that I minister on fairly often is on how to stay encouraged. And of course, we have people come here from around the world in our school, and many of them are, along with us, have embarked on a journey to invade the impossible, see things happen that we've never seen happen before. And it's just impossible to embrace that kind of journey without disappointment. It was almost like, for many of you, it was easier when you didn't believe a miracle was possible. And then you could just accept whatever happened as it was God's will, and then just adjust your lifestyle to a lifestyle of things not happening. I mean, you know what I'm talking about there. Yeah. I've had people say, it's just a lot easier when I just didn't believe it was possible. But then you start making that shift and that adjustment. You start seeing what Jesus actually intended. He modeled. He illustrated for us. And then we have the challenge of finding mentors, people that can show us how to do stuff. Because I don't know about you, I'm not real good with directions. I'm really bad, actually. Benny, when I'm putting something together, a swing set for the kids, that goes back a few years. When I'm putting something together, toys for our grandkids, actually Benny does it often because I'm such a pain to work with. She reads the instructions and gives me directions. Because to me, the instructions are not really good instructions. It may seem logical to you to pick up part A and put it on part B, but that doesn't make any sense to me because there's other parts there. And I don't know, I just get confused. So she reads it, she'll read it out loud, and she'll tell me what to do. Oh, I should have it on videotape, put it on YouTube. It would really encourage a lot of stupid people. I just don't do good with it. And I feel like the same when I'm embarking on new areas in the kingdom. I mean, you know, so many years ago we started asking the question, like, wait a minute, isn't what Jesus did, isn't that supposed to happen? The deliverance, the healings, the miracles, confronting nature that's gone awry and whatever it might be. And we just, I don't mean to say there weren't people doing it, but we didn't know anyone. And so that just meant all of a sudden you have to start embracing a lifestyle of experimentation. You get as much instruction as you possibly can from Scripture, obviously, but then you begin to pursue things that are impossible, and sometimes it breaks through and sometimes it doesn't. And when you have that kind of a lifestyle, you have to learn quickly how to bring encouragement to yourself, how to bring strength to yourself, because you are suddenly introduced to a lifestyle where you don't know what you're doing. And whenever you do that, you subject yourself to options that you didn't have when you didn't believe. And the only way to navigate this kind of lifestyle that you've said yes to, that I've said yes to, is to know how to constantly bring encouragement and never put the blame on God when something doesn't work correctly. I mean, the lack is never on God's end of the equation. It's never on His end of the equation. It doesn't mean the other extreme, that I need to go into guilt and shame and self-pity and all that sort of stuff, because I did that. If it helped, I would be walking on water at the moment, believe me. I did it so well, so consistently, that I would have arrived by now. But the guilt-shame thing never helps to take us further in where we want to go. It's just easier sometimes just to not believe it was possible. And I feel like one of the best ways to shortchange humanity and the Lord Himself is just to resign yourself to whatever happens is the will of God. I think it's just a cheap way to live. And but obviously you've said no to that, and you've embraced the invitation to expect a miracle. Because of that, we have to know how to take adverse situations and see them get reversed, where Jesus is exalted and we become strengthened. And here's what I've noticed. I've been teaching on the subject for a lot of years, probably, I bet pretty consistently, probably for at least 12 years. And I found that even in our school, where I'll start the year, I'll deal with, in our school of ministry, I'll start somewhere in the first month or two of the school year. I will have to repeat it at least one, if not two more times before the year's over. Because you just get used to new things. You get exposed to new disappointments, like I never thought that was possible. And then I believed God, and I saw a breakthrough here, but I didn't see a breakthrough here, and that person was my favorite. And you just have all these emotional ups and downs. So here's just stuff that we have to learn and actually maintain in our life. Psalms 84 is one that I haven't talked to you about in quite a while. And I love it so much because it is a psalm of incredible opposites. It's a psalm of incredible turnaround. It reverses hellish situations into heavenly situations. So we're going to go through it. Let's just begin with verse 1. How lovely is your tabernacle. Remember, that's the dwelling place of the Lord. How lovely is your tabernacle, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. I love this particular psalm. The psalm is introducing. It's introducing the fruit of humanity in the glory. I want you just to picture this. Let me take a little sidestep here. Old Testament, high priest comes in before the Ark of the Covenant. That's where the presence of the Lord, the glory, the actual manifest presence of the Lord would rest, was on this box called the Ark of the Covenant. The high priest could come in one day a year on the Day of Atonement, present an offering, and postpone the penalty of sin for the nation of Israel for one more year. When David became king, he sensed a shift that actually became the prototype or the prophetic picture for New Testament Christianity. And that is, the people of God all are priests, and as priests we are all expected to come in before the Lord, not with a blood offering, because the blood has been shed once and for all, but with an offering of thanksgiving and praise, and literally laying ourselves down as a sacrifice, an offering in worship. And so what happened in David's period of time was actually a prophetic prototype. It was a picture of something that would be coming hundreds of years later. Well, this psalm was written during that period of time. So listen to what he says. He says, the sons of Korah wrote this. He says, which is as a group of priests, he says, my heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Now this is stunning, because these people aren't even technically born again yet. They can't, because the blood of Jesus hasn't been shed. They are devoted to the Lord. They dwell in the presence. They are worshipers. They continuously stay in that presence and exalt God. But they made a statement that to me is absolutely stunning. They said, "My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God." What does that mean? I believe it means that they've spent so much time in the presence of the Lord that that glory has recalibrated their desires, physical desires, to where their body aches for the presence of God. It's like they tapped into what God intended in the first place, is that there would be a hunger in every part, the mind, the emotions, the physical appetite of the human body. There would actually be this hunger for more of the presence, more of the glory. And God wrote that into the encounter, humanity with the glory. Something happens in that exchange where there's an appetite created that you were born to have in the first place. This is actually expressed in the Old Testament. How much more so is it possible for people like you, people like me, that have received Christ into our life by faith and have actually been born again of the Spirit of God, adopted into His family. Now we have this privilege to come into the actual manifest presence of the Lord. It's not just singing songs. It's not just giving physical response that seems appropriate, raising hands, dancing, kneeling, whatever it might be. It's that, but it's not just that. It's actual response, person to person. It's the acknowledgement of the King of Glory being right here. Something happens in that presence. He starts sharing Himself with us more. One of the most bizarre thoughts is to think about how much does He trust you. You can tell how much He trusts you by examining what He has entrusted to you. You can tell how much He trusts you by considering what He's entrusted to you. What has He entrusted to us? His name, His authority, His presence. He's actually given Himself to you. And now as worshipers, something starts happening the more He finds His people respond correctly. I don't mean religiously. I don't mean jumping through hoops. I mean, in true regard for who He is, something happens. He begins to manifest His presence more. Something I've prayed, probably the most consistent prayer I think I've prayed for you and for me, is that we would encounter His glory. It's been at least, it'd have to be at least 15 years. That we would encounter His glory. I do believe and realize that sometimes it manifests physically, and I'm as excited as anybody in the room for that. But I can feel a measure of glory in the room this morning, and I don't see any gold dust. I don't see any cloud. There's no lightning flashes. There's no writing on the wall. I'm thankful for it, believe me. I love when He manifests through external means, but I want to be able to recognize when He walks into the room without any visible indicators. And the only way I know to build that into our being, into our system, into the way we live, is to have consistent, regular encounters with the Lord that are not just corporate. I love the public worship, the corporate worship time, just as much as anything that we do. I just love so much. But if there's nothing that happens at home, then we're very restricted in where we can go. So here the psalmist says, my heart and my flesh, my body that would normally crave food, is craving glory. Judson Cornwell asked a question some years ago. He's a great, great Bible teacher from last century, and actually came to Bethel, goodness, way back in the early 80s, late 70s. And I got to go out to lunch with him once and just sit and listen. And there's a huge sucking sound in the room. It was me, just trying to get everything I could get by being in the same room with him. But I remember him talking about the glory. And he gave an illustration. It went something like this. If you take somebody who's been saved for 50 years and every Sunday morning at the end of a certain hymn, they have this encounter with the Lord. And then you have somebody that's been saved for only 2 years, but every day they have that hour in the presence, in the glory. At the end of 50 years or at the end of 2 years, who do you think will probably be the most like Christ? We instinctively know it's the person that took time in the glory. Why? Here's what I want you to know, that I want you to realize that you already know. We're changed in the glory. The Bible says, when we see him, we become like him. It is also true, as we see him, we become like him. I don't mean open vision with the eyes, although that's pretty cool. I'm talking about beholding him with the heart, that actual presence of the Lord. It's the desire to not live distracted. We live such a weird life because we've got our phones that can give us any information we need in a drop of a hat. I mean, somebody will stand up here and mention something about, some historical fact, and I dial it up on my iPad or my phone. I go, oh yeah, the year was 1859, and it just feels like I'm part of this huge international community that's sharing information. And it's wonderful, except in the presence, all of that pulls you away from my heart, and my flesh cries out for the living God. It's an interesting psalm. Look where it goes next. It's almost awkward. Even the sparrow has found a home, the swallow a nest for herself where she may lay her young. Even your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They will still be praising you. It's almost awkward. The psalm writer's talking about the presence, the glory. My body's crying out for you. I faint for you, O God. Even birds lay eggs on the altar and have baby chicks, and my heart is just for you. It just feels like a strange shifting of subjects there. Isaiah 54 has this passage. Let me read to you out of the New American Standard. It's been a favorite for many, many years. Shout for joy, O barren one, you who have borne no child. Break forth into joyful shouting and cry aloud, you who have not travailed. For the sons of the desolate one will be more numerous than the sons of the married woman. What's being said here? All right, those of you where it's not working, in this case, it's barrenness. You want children, there's no children. But it could be in any area of life. It's in ministry, it's in family, it's in relationships, it's in business, it's in whatever. You fill in the blank. It's the fact that it's not working as it ought to be working. And this is what he does. He invites us to the altar of the Lord where even birds have babies. Even nature yields to the nature presence and becomes fruitful. And he says, come into this place. Why? Shout for joy, barren one. Pretty soon there'll be a World Series. At the end of the World Series, after the Giants have won. This goes all over the world. I just brought depression into many living rooms. So sorry. At the end of the World Series, when whoever wins, the sportscasters will be in the locker room, and you will hear athletes giving thanks to the Lord for their victory. And I really am thankful for that, because there was a time when if there was a believer, they wouldn't talk about it. Now they're everywhere. And I'm so encouraged by that. But it doesn't take, does this make sense? It doesn't take great maturity to rejoice when you've won the Reader's Digest sweepstakes. If you can't praise God then you're basically dead and stupid. Even people who don't believe in God start giving thanks, about that time. That's not the challenge. The challenge that we are invited into is, listen, everybody's got an area of barrenness where it just doesn't seem to be working. So you just go stand in that room. Is it business? Go stand in that room and start shouting for joy in the barrenness. It doesn't say just offer a nice offering of thankfulness and try to think positive thoughts and be a happy person. No, it says go nuts. Go nuts with happiness. Start celebrating goodness and kindness. Start giving the shout of praise. Lift up rejoicing in the context of loss and barrenness. And something happens. That barren person starts, in this case, the analogy is with giving birth to children. So here, Isaiah 54 has this analogy. A woman who every year or so gives birth to a child. Over here is a woman who's never had one and wants them badly and is far behind her pace. But she starts living in the realm of shouts of joy, in the place where the body itself adjusts to the manifest presence of the Lord. In that place of encounter with the glory of God, something breaks and she passes her up because she went from natural reproduction to supernatural productivity. But how did it happen? It happened in the atmosphere of the glory, in the atmosphere of the manifest presence of God. But that response of her heart was the key thing. It's the shout of joy before the answer comes. It's not even in this context the shout of joy because the answer is coming. It's the shout of joy because He's good. It's the shout of joy because He is. Too many try to psych themselves up to giving thanks before the answer comes. I believe in that. But you know what? Dial it back a bit. He deserves it. I mean, what happens if you only pay your bills when you have more than enough? That's kind of silly, isn't it? You have $1,000 rent, and you only pay rent when you have $2,000 in the bank and nothing to do with the other $1,000. Well, that's dumb. A lot of people minister to God that way. When there's abundance, they give Him what He's due. That was a really good point. They only express the gratitude when there's abundance, when there's just so much great things happening in life, then they're just the happiest person in the planet. Well, I just bless God. I've testified to my neighbors. I'm just boasting in the Lord. But what about when there's just barely enough to make it through the day? Who do you give to first? I hope you're getting the picture, the analogy here. Verse 5. Blessed is the man whose strength is in you, whose heart is set on a pilgrimage. If there's any phrase that seems to represent you, to me, it's that phrase, whose heart is set on a pilgrimage. It doesn't matter to me if it's first-year school of ministry students that I sit down and talk with, or those of you that have been here for 20 years and longer. The most consistent theme that I run into is people have come here who embraced a pilgrimage, a journey. It's not a weekend experience. I realize we have people visit us, but even you have come because you've said yes to a lifelong pilgrimage, a lifelong journey into something. And I love this phrase because it seems to indicate the kind of devotion the Lord is looking for. He's not Winkie Pratt. He had this statement that he would use. He probably still does. He would say, you know, it used to be these bumper stickers that would say, "Try Jesus," and he would say, "Jesus is not on trial. We are. You don't try Jesus. You know, He doesn't come in sample sizes. You know, you don't get a little cup at Costco. Oh, that's good. I think I'll have a bigger cup. You know." There's no trial-sized Jesus. He comes as Lord of all. And I love this about you. I love this about our journey together. Blessed is the man whose heart is on a pilgrimage. Well, hello. I'm glad you left. So it was here first service too, but we cast it out, and he just tried to come back with 7 of his friends, and we broke them all. All right. Verse 6 says, these are the people on the journey, all right? Verse 6, as they passed through the valley of Baca. Baca means weeping. As they passed through the valley of Baca, they make it a spring. As they pass through the valley of Baca. This is such a wonderful picture. I love things that are illustrated in Scripture in nature. Like I can't get enough of Israel leaving Egypt, going into the Promised Land. I honestly can't get enough of that story, because that story, I understand. That's instructions with pictures. I used to own a Volkswagen, and how many of you have ever owned a Volkswagen? Did you buy the book called The Idiot's Guide to Repair? How many of you had one of those? It was awesome. Pick up the wrench in your right hand. Look at 1 o'clock. You'll see a size whatever bolt. Put it on that bolt. Turn it counterclockwise. Yeah, I need a kind of instruction. To me, that's what these pictures are like. He says, you're on a pilgrimage, and he says, here they are. They go through the valley of weeping. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. That's problems. That's disappointments. That's the stuff we don't like. And so here they are. They're descending into the valley, the difficulties, the challenges to their faith. And it says, they come into the valley of Baca, but they turn it into a spring. A spring is a life-giving source. The spring is something that brings fruition, fruitfulness, blessing. This is an unusual picture. How do you take tears that drop to the ground and turn that place on the ground that's become moist with tears, turn it into a life-giving spring? It's this wonderful prophetic picture of those whose hearts are set on the presence. It's what a person in the presence, in the glory, has access to at every turn in the road, is to take tears and turn it into a life-giving spring. But if that weren't good enough, look at the rest of the verse. It says the rain covers it with pools. So look at the thought. They pass through the valley of weeping. They make it a spring. And the rain covers it with pools. Here's the phenomenon. If you drive to Reno, you take, I forget what highway. I think it's 89 up by Old Station, and you take back into backside of Reno. There's a stretch in there where there's forest to the right side of the highway, and it's like desert to the left side. When clouds of rain come, where do they go? They go to the forest. Why? I'm sure somebody in here is smart enough to know. All I know is that there's moisture in those trees, and somehow it attracts the clouds, and the clouds come there, and that's where it's going to rain. If it's only going to rain in one place, it will rain where the forest is. Why? Because water attracts water. Water attracts water. Now look at this. They pass through the valley of weeping. This is loss. This is disappointment. But this is a person who's on a pilgrimage. This is a person whose body has begun to ache for the glory, for the presence. This is the person whose heart is set on divine encounters as a lifestyle, not as an additional part of life, but the purpose of life. This person takes the tears, turns it into a spring, and now that spring, that pool of water that has developed because I've reversed the effects of my circumstances, that water now attracts the outpouring of the Spirit, the clouds. See, rain in Scripture is this incredible prophetic picture of outpouring. Acts chapter 2. And I will pour out my Spirit. Psalm 72, I think it is, says, and he will come to you like rain. Hosea says, and he comes to us like rain. So here's this wonderful picture of God coming and pouring out the Spirit of God on people. Who does he pour out on? Well, this is an interesting thing, because you and I have a role in the outpouring of the Spirit. It's not that we persuade him with begging. It's that we've set our heart on a pilgrimage that says, you receive glory no matter what. I've determined to give you honor no matter what. I'm not just going to write the check when I have extra. I'm going to give you thanks because it's what you're worth. I'm going to respond to you based on your worth, not mine. What I think of you, not what I think of me. And something starts happening where these circumstances that have been gnawing at our life, robbing us of faith, suddenly they start developing into this place of victory. And that place of victory is represented as a pool of water. But now that water attracts more water. And the clouds of God's outpouring comes and begins to create pools all over the land that was once dead, dry, and barren. Does this make sense? It's the life of the believer set on the presence, set on the glory. I'm praying. I'm hoping we can make this transition. You guys impress me all the time by your passion for worship, your love of the name Jesus, the desire to exalt him no matter what. I honestly, you make me rich. I feel so rich because I get to be with people that love God like you do. I'm looking for a graduation, a shift in the glory. I've tasted it a few times. I've seen those transitions come in a gathering. They're unusual, they're rare, but they're so holy. Holy, unfortunately, comes up in mind as so holy that it's frightening. I'm not thinking that way. They're so holy that all I want to do is sit and stare. And I just want to sit and just express love all day long. I just want to honor and give honor, praise, and thanks to this God who is so good and so kind. And I feel like there are shifts in the presence and the glory. Here's what I'm looking for. I expect you to come in here and have such an encounter with the Lord that when you leave and you go down and have lunch, that people wonder, what's different about you? Because you didn't come in alone. Just 2 weeks ago, I was in Cleveland, and a young lady gave testimony. She was at this conference that I did with Steve Witt's church there on the goodness of God. And she came a year ago, and she was having 35 epileptic seizures a day, even with medication. And she came, received prayer. She's completely healed. She came back to give the testimony. In fact, she said since November 5th, which is the first day of the conference last year, she said since November 5th of 2011, I've not had one seizure. Amazing. But I got a little bit more of the story this time. She said, actually, we prayed for her, and I remember praying for her. And she's a model from New York City. She models in New York City. So here she is. She comes up and gives testimony since November 5th of last year. But she added a piece this time. She said, actually, last year, when I walked into the building, I felt it lift. And then she came forward for prayer. We prayed for her. Kind of put the seal on the deal, I guess. But the point I'm trying to make is she walked into the glory. She walked into the atmosphere, and whatever was on her got off. And she was healed completely. That's my cry right there. I mean, that's the deal right there. I love laying hands on the sick, and I hope he saves a couple for us. But the thought that you could come into the presence and be restored, into the presence and be delivered, that torment that's just harassed, that's kept you up at nights, that junk, that stuff that just happens in life, just gets broken off in the presence. I'm actually praying that as they drive onto the property, Who else? You, me. As we drive onto the property, that there's just this, oh, it's going to be a good day. So they make it a spring. The rain covers it with pools. They go from strength to strength. Each one appears before God in Zion. We're going to stop there, except for verse 12. O Lord of hosts, blessed is the man who trusts in you. Do you know what praise is an expression of? It's an expression of trust. Faith in God, trusting Him, is so critical that Hebrews says we can't please Him apart from faith. Imagine that. There is no Christian activity I can be involved in separate from faith that would bring Him any pleasure. Everything that we do is done as an expression of faith or trust in Him that delights His heart. He's not a heavy-handed taskmaster. He's a Father who knows that if I express trust in Him, I am positioned for my breakthrough. And the trust is expressed before the breakthrough comes. And to be honest, the trust is expressed even if the thing I think should come doesn't come. I remain unwavering in my expressions of thanks. I don't like formulas, but I do like patterns. I do like patterns for life. And I see something in this psalm that I haven't talked to you about for, I think, 3 or 4 years, probably. There's something about the presence of the Lord to refine my appetites down to the one thing I can be assured of: His love for me, His generosity with me, His kindness to entrust Himself to me. I don't have to understand much else. I've got that. I've got the Father who has given Himself generously, liberally, to me, to you. I want you to stand with me for... I think probably everybody in this room has this passion to, be a giant killer. The whole David, Goliath picture. We look at it often. It's actually a favorite story for a reason. He first killed the lion and the bear when he was leading his dad's sheep before he ever faced off with Goliath and killed him. How do you think he had the courage to face a lion and a bear? He was a man of the presence on the backside of the wilderness with sheep as he lifted up these songs. And he discovered that God actually came when he sang. He learned by experience that God inhabits praise. He started seeing things unfold before he was ever a king. He was just a shepherd boy. But in that place, he learned what courage was because of a passion for the presence. And it was out of the passion for the presence. The bear had no chance. The lion had no chance. And neither did this Goliath that taunted the armies of the living God. I would like to suggest to you that worshipers are trained, born giant killers. It's just who you are.